If you're working with an agent when you sell or list or lease your property, you will be signing what is known as a listing agreement. And NAR has a consumer guide on listing agreements, and I will be putting a link to this guide in the description below. For you, if you want a copy of this. They're generally pretty short. It's about 1 page. And since this is NAR's guide, I'm going to be reading a lot of this to try to make sure that I am doing it correctly and in alignment with their consumer guide. So let's get started. What is a listing agreement? A listing agreement is a contract between you and your agent that says that the agent can represent you and market your property to potential buyers and their agent. It establishes a sales price or lease price if you're a landlord, and it lays out the type of professional representation and services your agent will provide, what they will be paid for those services. Agent compensation is fully negotiable and not set by law. Now, I'm going to tell you one thing that is important. It's here in Kentucky, also in Indiana, listing agreements have to be written. In fact, pretty much any real estate contract has to be written. And so that's one thing, having an oral contract. In contract law, there are oral contracts, but for real estate, it must be written. And so here in Kentucky, it has to list the property has to be identified, a price has to be identified, how much the compensation has to be identified, and it has to have a date. So you can't have a contract that goes forever. All right. So back on topic. All right. What are my options for agent representation? There are several different possibilities, but we'll start number 1, exclusive agency listing agreement. This is where you work with just one agent and agree to compensate them if they sell your home. However, this allows you to retain the option to sell your home yourself without having to compensate your agent for the sale. So that is exclusive agency listing agreement. Now, the second one, the names sound similar, but they are different. So listen. So this second one is exclusive right to sell listing agreement. This is something different. It is not the same. So just so you know that. With an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, you work with just one agent, but you're responsible for your agent's compensation no matter who sells the property. So if you feel like you sold the property, but you have an exclusive right to sell listing agreement with your agent, you still owe your agent the commission according to that contract. No matter who sells it, they still get paid. And I'm going to make a quick comment about that. You can't say everywhere, but I will say that is probably the most common listing agreement that is being used. A lot of agents, a lot of companies, they do not really like doing the exclusive agency listing or other options because it's often not that clear who did it, because you'll have these kinds of situations where if I listed your property and I put it on the MLS and I put out signage and I paid a photographer and we got all kinds of pictures and I did a virtual tour and I made a video and all of these things, you can spend a lot of money on that. And so let's say that you do all that, and so you have all this advertising out, and someone sees your advertising, but instead of calling you, which they're supposed to do, they say, oh, I know the guy who owns that thing, I'll call them. And so then they call you, and so it's like, well, who really sold that property? And so it gets to be confusing, and it's a point of contention, and a lot of people, it's like, man, I don't really want to risk spending a whole bunch of money and then not get paid. So, we already, in these kinds of agreements, in the listing agreements where we are paid a percentage commission on the sale, we already are risking a lot, because if it doesn't sell, then we don't get anything for no matter how much work we put in. And we understand that. I mean, that's part of the game, is that sometimes, that's just the way it is. But it's a big risk. And, a lot of that stuff is invisible. When people are working with an agent, they don't really realize, all the stuff that's going on in the background. So, all right, let's get back on task here. A limited service listing agreement. You work with just one agent who provides a limited set of services, such as publicly marketing your home on an MLS system, an online platform that compiles home listings from different sources, but may not provide other services such as showings, input on offers, or supporting the negotiating process. So these were, I think, a lot more popular a few years ago. They seem to be kind of going away. I think that there's still people that do that. There are a lot of people that really just wanted to pay to get their property on the MLS, and they didn't really want any other services. And so some of these places would do things like they might just have a flat fee to get it on the MLS, or maybe a very small percentage or something along those lines. But they didn't do anything else, and basically the property owner would do all of the rest of that stuff. I'm just seeing those less and less, but I think that they are still around. And I will say that for me personally, most of the time I won't do those kinds of things. And one of the reasons is that there's kind of a, there's sort of a liability issue there. I mean, if the property doesn't sell, or if there's some sort of a problem after it sells and something goes on, you kind of open yourself up to potential complaints or liability. And it's like, it's a pretty big risk. And so if you get into an agreement like that, I think you want to be very, very clear what is expected and make sure that that is crystal clear in the agreement. Okay. Going on, non-exclusive listing agreement. You work with one agent or multiple agents and agree to compensate the agent who ultimately sells your home. You don't see these too often in the United States. There are some places where you see them. It's very common in other countries. I do think that it creates some potential problems. I generally will not work with that. I don't know if there are people that will work with that or not. I don't happen to know any, but most people won't work with that. And again, it's sort of a question. It's like, well, what if there's different agents are all claiming that they're responsible for this thing? How do you decide? If there's, everybody has a sign, everybody has it on the MLS, everybody has this kind of stuff. How do you decide who the person was who actually sold the home? And it just kind of creates a problem. And so especially in the U.S., not many people are doing this. Now, I'm going to go off script here a little bit. All of these are basically, most of these anyway, I can't say that 100%, but most of these are sort of situations where maybe you're doing a percentage of sales. But that's not the only way that you can do this. You can do flat fees. You can do people that do time and materials. Now, I will say that those aren't as common, but it is possible. It is something you can ask about. But I will tell you that it's not that common. I think a lot of people would not really do that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't people that do it, and it doesn't mean that you can't do it that way. I think for most people, it's probably going to be a better deal for you if you do it as a percentage of sales of the contract rather than time and materials, because the one thing, I mean, if it doesn't sell, you're off the hook. You don't have to pay anything. And so that the risk is actually being carried by the agent. All right. There are some other things to know. I mentioned the things in Kentucky about required parts on a listing contract. With all of the stuff that's happened in the last year, 2024, we had the lawsuits settled by NAR and the Department of Justice came in, and so there were some changes. And one of the changes, it primarily has to do with buyer's agent, but it also affects seller's agents, and it will affect the listing contracts. And I will say that one of the things that it has done is it has said we have to be a lot more specific in the listing contracts about compensation and kind of, who's getting paid out of this, how, under what circumstances, so that it's very, very clear. All right, let's move forward. What services might be included in a listing agreement? The listing agreement typically lays out the agreed upon methods your agent will use to sell the home. Your agreement might include information on how your property will be marketed. This could include listing on an MLS, offering seller compensation, covering some costs associated with purchasing a home for the buyer, offering compensation for a buyer's agent. And there are other consumer guides from NAR on offers of compensation and seller's compensation and MLSs. And I'm probably going to cover those in some future videos. We won't get off topic here on that. But kind of another couple of comments. Lots of times in the listing contracts, there'll be like check boxes for things just to make sure that we're all on the same page. For example, signage. Usually there's something in the contract saying that you agree to allow signage on the property. Not everybody wants that. I think in general it's a good idea. Not always, but in general it's a good idea. But lots of times they need your specific permission to do that. Pictures on the MLS. The stuff that we put out there, it's online and it's available to the public. And so you just need to be sure that you're in agreement with that. That's not in everybody's listing contract, but I do think that's something that you need to think about. So, all right, let's move forward. Are offers of compensation mandatory? No, they are not. It's up to you to determine if making an offer of compensation is the best approach for selling your property. Agents who are realtors are here to help you on marketing strategies so that you can make the decision that works for you. Now, I'm going to make a side comment here. They are not mandatory. They never have been mandatory, but I will tell you that in most cases, I would say it's a good idea. And I'm just going to make a very quick comment about that. One of the things is it expands the number of people that will be able to look at your property. And the more that you have, the better chances you have to get offers, the more potential offers. I'm not promising multiple offers, but the more ability to get offers in, the more people you can get in the door, the more likely you are to sell or lease your property, and also the more likely you are to get the best price possible. So, okay. How do I know what will work best for me? And I would say that, one of the things is you need to find a broker who you trust, someone who you think has the experience, who understands the market, who kind of understands what the best practices are. And you may want to talk to more than one. You may want to talk to a few. But I would say that in general, that's the best way to figure that out, is have a conversation. You can bring up any of these things and ask them. They may have their own policies, they may have their own agreements, and, that's fine. But that's probably the best way. So anyway, I've run over 10 minutes. I try not to do that. So let's wrap this up. If you have other questions about this, please leave me a comment. I try to respond to all the comments, and I'll put in the description a link to this consumer guide. I'll also put a link to my website, so that if you have other questions and you don't want to leave a comment, you can contact me directly through my website. If you have other questions about real estate, please let me know. Also, you might check out some of my other videos. I cover a number of topics. There may be things that will answer your questions there. If you like this video or found it helpful, if you don't mind, please like it. If you know someone who could benefit from this, please share it. And if you like listening to things about real estate and you want to follow along and hear other topics, we cover all kinds of things, you might consider subscribing. And that's it, my friends. Have a fantastic day, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.